My name is Margaret Foster, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 45, a part-time training officer with the National Guard, and I've spent more than 20 years learning how to run operations, keep schedules tight, and deal with chaos. That training paid off. Thanks to my VA benefits, bonuses from deployments, and years of saving, I bought a small but solid brick house in Cedar Creek, Texas. It's quiet, clean, and exactly the kind of place I dreamed about when I was stuck in tents overseas. The lawn is neat, the neighbors are friendly but not nosy, and for the first time in my life I can drink my morning coffee without anyone asking me for something. On a Wednesday morning I was sitting at the kitchen table, boots still on from a dawn workout, scrolling through my training notes for next week. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room. I heard a car pull into the driveway. That wasn't unusual. My sister Teresa liked to drop by unannounced. But this time the engine cut off and stayed silent. No text, no call, just the sound of her heels on the walkway. Teresa is 2 years younger than me, but acts like she's older. She dresses like a realtor, even though she's been between jobs for months. Her husband Kevin drives trucks, off and on, depending on contracts. They rent a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Dallas with their 2 kids, Luke and Chloe. Add Kevin's widowed mother, Dolores, and you've got 5 people under one roof. I know it's tight, but it's their choice. The doorbell rang twice, fast. I opened it. Teresa stood there with a forced smile, clutching her phone like it was a microphone. She didn't bother with small talk. "Maggie, we're moving in," she said, like she was telling me the weather. I blinked. "Moving in where?" "Here," she said. "My husband, the kids, and my mother-in-law. We're out of options. The apartment's too small and we can't afford rent anymore. We've already decided everything." That. It landed like a punch. She didn't ask. She didn't even soften it with please or just for a while. She announced it. I set my mug down and leaned on the counter. "Teresa, are you actually telling me or are you asking?" She shifted her weight, avoiding my eyes. "Come on, Maggie. You've got 3 bedrooms. You live here alone. We're family. Family helps each other." I'd heard that line before. In my family helps each other usually meant I help them and they forget to say thanks. I could feel the old pattern trying to pull me in again. "You've already decided?" I said. "Yes," she said firmly. "It's crowded at our place. Luke and Chloe don't even have a proper space to do their homework. Dolores needs care. Kevin's working long hours. You're always at drills or training. You don't even use half this house. It's temporary until we find something bigger." "All in." I raised an eyebrow. "How temporary?" She waved her hand like it didn't matter. "A few months. Maybe 6. We'll help with the bills. It'll be fine." I know exactly how temporary works in this family. When our cousin Jenny moved in with Teresa for a few weeks, she stayed 2 years. "Teresa, you can't just..." She cut me off. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be. We're already packed. Kevin rented a truck for Saturday. We'll bring everything then. It's decided." "How?" Her voice was calm, but final, like a court order. I stood still, the same way I do on the firing line when someone else's shot goes wild. No flinching, no jumping, just listening. Years of military briefings taught me that silence sometimes rattles people more than yelling. Teresa mistook my silence for consent. Her shoulders dropped in relief. "Great. Thank you, Maggie. You're a lifesaver. The kids are so excited. We'll keep things neat. You won't even notice us." End of track. I pictured Luke and Chloe turning my sewing room into a playroom, Dolores watching daytime TV in my guest room, Kevin stretching out on my couch. I pictured the bills doubling, my quiet mornings gone, my house smelling like someone else's cooking. I felt my jaw tighten. Teresa glanced at her phone. "I've got to run. Kevin's waiting. We're finalizing the storage unit. Saturday morning, okay?" I nodded once, slowly. Saturday morning. She smiled like a politician after a press conference. "You're the best sister ever," she said, kissed me on the cheek, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the coffee pot. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel like mine. The words, "We've already decided," echoed in my head. I reached for my phone and opened the veterans legal aid contact I'd saved months ago. I didn't hit call. Not yet. But my thumb hovered over the number. From the window, I watched Teresa's car back out of the driveway. She was on the phone, probably telling Kevin the mission was accomplished. She thought I'd just roll over. I took a breath, long and slow. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. It was something else, something steadier. The same feeling I had before a big drill. Watch, plan, act. My house had been my safe zone, my reward for 2 decades of service. Now my sister was trying to turn it into a lifeboat for her sinking ship. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat down. The military taught me never to go into a situation without a plan. Teresa might think she'd already won, but this wasn't over. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote a single line at the top. Operation Boundary. Under it, I listed dates, contacts, and steps. Trust paperwork. Cabin deposit. Sharon's availability. Major Cooper's advice. Outside, a mockingbird chirped on the fence. I glanced at the clock. Only 8:15 a.m. The day was just starting, and so was I. I checked my schedule for the next drill weekend. I could rearrange shifts, clear time to handle what was coming. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to be prepared. As I sipped my coffee, I pictured Teresa walking back into this kitchen on Saturday with her whole clan, expecting to unload boxes. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I closed the notebook and looked around my kitchen. Everything in its place. The calm before any mission is always the best time to tighten your plan. I got up, grabbed my boots, and headed for the door. There was work to do before Saturday. I tightened the laces on my boots, the same way I do before a long ruck march, and walked out onto the porch. The sun was still low, casting a sharp light across the yard. A pickup rolled by, and a neighbor waved. I raised a hand without smiling. My head was already running through contingencies. By noon, my phone had started buzzing like an alarm clock. First, Teresa with a text. Kevin got the truck for Saturday. Can you clear the driveway? A few minutes later, another message. We're bringing Dolores's recliner and the kids' beds. Don't worry, we'll figure out where to put everything. I didn't answer. Then a call from Aunt Marge. Maggie, honey, your sister's going through a rough time. She told me you're letting them stay. You're such a good soul. I'm proud of you. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear and said, I didn't actually agree. Aunt Marge chuckled nervously. Well, you know how Teresa is. She's just stressed. Family helps family. Same line, different voice. When the call ended, another one came in. Teresa again. Hey, just checking. Did you get the texts? We'll need space for Dolores's oxygen machine. I said. Teresa, you're assuming... She cut me off. We've already booked the movers. Please don't stress about it. It's temporary. Kevin's working on getting us out as soon as possible. Her tone was a mixture of command and pity, like she was the one doing me a favor. I set the phone down on the table and stared at it. In the Guard, we have a phrase. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. No rushing decisions, just deliberate moves. At 1,500, I drove to the training field. Today's session was a combatives refresher for a group of recruits. Nothing fancy. Stances, leverage, control. The kind of training that keeps you calm when someone twice your size tries to push you around. I liked teaching it. It reminded me that you don't need brute force to win. You need position, timing, and clarity. Major Linda Cooper walked across the field while I was correcting a recruit's grip. She's tall, built like a runner, and never minces words. You look like someone's taken your parking spot, she said with a half smile. I shrugged. Something like that. Not. You know you can talk to me, right? I've seen that look before. It's the I'm planning a counter-offensive look. I smirked. Guess I'm predictable. She handed me a bottle of water. Remember what we teach these kids. Set your perimeter before the fight starts. I nodded. I'm working on it. After the session, I sat on the bleachers, sweat cooling on my neck, and opened my notebook again. Operation Boundary. I drew a rough map of my house, marking which rooms I'd need to clear if things went south. It looked like a simple sketch, but it was really a way to steady my thoughts. Sharon Mills walked up, carrying a canvas bag full of folders. You're still at it, huh? She said, plopping down next to me. Teresa's moving in on Saturday, I said flatly. Sharon raised an eyebrow. Moving in or trying to? She thinks it's a done deal. She's already rented a truck. Sharon whistled low. Girl, you'd better lock that down. You know how they are. Once they're in, good luck getting them out. That's why I started this months ago, I said, tapping the folder with the trust papers inside. I just haven't told them yet. She chuckled. You always were 2 moves ahead. So what's the plan? I didn't answer directly. Instead, I flipped to a page where I'd listed steps. Verify trust paperwork complete. Confirm cabin keys. Schedule locksmith. Sharon peered over my shoulder. You're serious? I'm not kicking them out of some hotel room. They're trying to occupy my house, I said. There's a difference. Sharon leaned back. Well, don't forget to eat. Tactical victories aren't worth a damn if you're too tired to enjoy them. I smiled at that. Noted. On the drive home, I passed the old gas station where Teresa used to work summers in high school. We'd both scrubbed floors there to earn pocket money. Funny how people change. She'd always been the talker, the one who could charm anyone. I'd been the one who followed rules and stacked shelves in order. My phone buzzed again at a stoplight. This time it was Kevin. Hey, Maggie, it's Kevin. Just want to thank you ahead of time for helping us out. I know Teresa can be pushy, but you're a saint. We'll try to stay out of your hair. I kept my voice even. Kevin, nothing's been finalized. Oh, he said after a pause. She told me you were cool with it. Bleh. I didn't say that. Another pause. Well, we'll talk Saturday then. Thanks again. He hung up before I could reply. By the time I reached my driveway, the sun was low. The house looked the same, but felt different. I could almost see moving boxes stacked in the hall, kids' shoes scattered by the door, Dolores's recliner blocking my view of the TV. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and locked it again behind me. Old habit. I went straight to the kitchen and opened the cabinet where I keep my important files. The trust papers were there, signed and notarized. The cabin confirmation email was printed and stapled to the key receipt. Everything in order. I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly. This wasn't a battle I wanted, but it was one I wasn't going to lose. The next morning at 0600, I was back on the porch doing stretches when the first call came. Teresa again. Hey, just making sure you've cleared the guest room closet. Dolores has some medical equipment. I said nothing for a moment, listening to the birds. Teresa, I finally said. You should probably hold off on making too many assumptions. She laughed lightly. Oh, Maggie, you're such a planner. Don't worry, we'll work it out. See you Saturday. She hung up before I could reply. I rolled my shoulders and looked out at the street. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass. A delivery van passed by. Everything looked normal, but under the surface it wasn't. I went back inside, opened the notebook again, and wrote in big letters across the next page. Perimeter. Mental plus legal. Underneath I listed times, calls, contacts. This wasn't about drama. It was about boundaries, plain and simple. I checked my watch. There were still hours before drill practice. Enough time to tighten a few loose ends. The coffee pot gurgled in the background as I made a mental inventory. Documents ready, allies lined up, plan solid. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Sharon's name. My thumb hovered over the call button. Outside, a car slowed in front of my house, then kept going. I watched its taillights disappear and closed the notebook. The day was already moving forward. So was I. The notebook stayed open on the kitchen table, but my hand was already reaching for the folder with the trust papers. I slid them out, checked the seals, and laid everything in neat rows like gear before inspection. Nothing out of place. That habit was drilled into me at Fort Jackson and never left. 6 months earlier, I'd been sitting in the same kitchen when Teresa first dropped her. Maybe we could all stay with you for a bit. Comment. It wasn't a request back then either. It was a test balloon. I'd smiled, poured her more coffee, and made a mental note. By the end of that week, I'd called the Veterans Legal Aid Center. They'd walked me through every step of putting the house into a veterans trust, explaining how it would protect me from claims or family arrangements. It wasn't quick. There were forms, notarizations, background checks, but I treated it like an assignment. Complete one task each day. Cross it off. By the time Teresa texted me in a panic about losing her apartment, everything was already signed. I opened the drawer where I kept the cabin documents. Pine Ridge, Oklahoma, A little cedar-sided place up a hill, nothing fancy, but quiet. I'd put a deposit down 2 years ago as a someday retreat. The seller liked veterans and gave me a fair deal. Keys delivered last month. My plan had been to fix it up slowly, maybe retire there. Now it was my fallback. Sharon knocked once on the back door and let herself in. She held 2 travel mugs. "You look like a general planning D-Day," she said, handing me coffee. "Feels like it," I said. She set her bag on the counter. "I pulled your cabin files from the storage unit. Everything's in order." She tapped the trust papers. "And this is ironclad. Nobody can touch this house except you." I leaned back in the chair. "Good. Because they think it's theirs already." Sharon grinned. "They always do. People think veterans are pushovers because we're disciplined. They forget discipline cuts both ways." I chuckled at that. "I'm not trying to humiliate anyone. I just want my home." "That's not revenge. That's self-defense," she said, sipping her coffee. The 2 of us spent the next hour going over practical details. Where to store my personal items before Saturday. Which locks to change. Who to call if Kevin got aggressive. Sharon took notes like a nurse prepping for triage. At noon, my phone rang. Meyer Cooper. "Captain Foster, you got a minute?" "Always," I said. "Just checking on you. You looked tense at training yesterday." "I'm fine, ma'am," I said automatically. She laughed. "Don't ma'am me. I've seen that face. That's the face of someone about to deploy a plan." I hesitated, then said, "Family trouble. They're trying to move in." Her tone shifted from joking to sharp. "Did you sign the trust papers I told you about?" "Yes." "Good. Then you're holding the high ground. Stick to the paperwork. Don't argue feelings. Just facts." "Yes, ma'am. And remember," she added, "no one can guilt you out of your own perimeter." After we hung up, I felt steadier. In the Guard, you learn to identify your allies. Cooper and Sharon were mine. I opened the notebook again and added a new line. Saturday, verify trust copy in car. Beneath it, cabin stock essentials Friday night. Iber. The rest of the afternoon I spent quietly moving certain valuables into my trunk. Photo albums, my grandmother's quilt, my training manuals. Not because I thought Teresa would steal them, but because I didn't want them trampled in a moving frenzy. While I worked, I remembered my first field exercise as a lieutenant. We'd built a perimeter with concertina wire and watched the sunset from behind it. One of the sergeants had said, "This wire isn't to keep us in. It's to remind them out there we're not open ground." That line stuck with me. By evening, the house looked the same but felt like a command post. Boxes labeled, keys on hooks, papers stacked. The air smelled of coffee and fresh paper. Sharon was back at her own place making dinner for her grandkids. I stood in the hallway and listened to the quiet. At 1,800, my phone lit up with a group text from Teresa. "Kevin's got Saturday off. We'll be there early with the truck. Dolores is excited. Kids can't wait to see their rooms." Kevin added a thumbs-up emoji. I typed a short reply. "Drive safe." Then put the phone face down. Out the window, the street was calm. A boy rode by on a bike with a baseball glove dangling from his handlebars. A dog barked in the distance. My lawn needed mowing, but I didn't move. Instead, I made a list of what to load into my car for Pine Ridge. Uniforms, boots, laptop, training materials. It felt strange but also familiar, like prepping for an exercise. I called Sharon one more time. "Everything's in place," I said. "Good," she replied. "I'll swing by Saturday morning just to be a witness. People behave better when there's a third party." "Thanks." "No thanks needed. I like a good show." I laughed softly. Let's hope it's not too much of a show. After we hung up, I walked through each room slowly. Bedroom, clear. Guest room, clear. Sewing room, my sanctuary. Kitchen, spotless. In the hallway mirror, my face looked calm, almost bored. That was exactly the expression I wanted. I thought about Teresa's line, "You won't even notice us." The truth was, I already did. Even before they arrived, their presence was in every corner. But the paperwork on my table was more than ink and signatures. It was my line in the sand. I took the trust documents, slid them into a weatherproof folder, and placed it in my go bag. On top, I set the cabin keys. The metal felt cool and solid in my palm. Outside, dusk settled over Cedar Creek. Porch lights flicked on up and down the street. I stood at the window for a long moment, then turned off the lamp and walked back to the kitchen. The coffee pot was empty, but I filled it again, out of habit. The smell rose warm and bitter. My phone buzzed one last time with a message from Teresa. Don't forget to clear space for the kids' things. I didn't answer. I poured coffee into a mug, took a sip, and set it down beside the open notebook. My pen hovered over the page, then I wrote in block letters, "Control the perimeter." Beneath it, I listed the next 3 actions, neat and straight, one after another. The house was quiet. My plan was active. My breathing was slow and steady. I looked at the clock and then at the door. There was still work to do. The pen was still in my hand when the doorbell rang. A polite ding this time, not the usual push and enter. I set the pen down, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and opened the door. Teresa stood there holding a plate of muffins like some sitcom neighbor. "Morning, Maggie," she said, bright as a TV anchor. "Thought I'd bring you something sweet." I stepped aside. "Kitchen's that way," I said. She walked in, scanning the hallway like an inspector. "Smells like coffee. You always make the best coffee." I kept my tone neutral. "It's in the pot. Help yourself." Kevin appeared behind her a moment later, the kids trailing like ducklings. Dolores stayed out in the car, fiddling with her phone. It was a full-court press, disguised as a friendly visit. Luke wandered toward my sewing room. "What's in here?" he asked. "Stay in the living room, buddy," I said. "That room's off limits." He stopped, blinked, and turned back to the couch. Chloe climbed onto one of my chairs like she owned it. Kevin stood near the kitchen island, arms crossed. Teresa put the muffins on the counter. "We just wanted to see how you're doing," she said. "You sounded tense in your text last night." "I'm fine," I said, pouring coffee. "Busy." Kevin cleared his throat. "The kids are really excited about moving in. They keep asking which room is theirs." "That's interesting," I said. Teresa laughed nervously. "They're just kids. You know how they are." I leaned on the counter. "Did either of you ask me if they could have a room?" Teresa's smile wavered. Kevin shifted his weight. "We assumed." I held up my hand. "That's the problem. You assumed." Teresa took a muffin from the plate she'd brought. "Maggie, we're family. We help each other." I looked straight at her. "I've been helping my whole life. Now I'm asking you to respect my space." Kevin opened his mouth, but Teresa shot him a look and he closed it. "We're not trying to take over," she said softly. "Then stop acting like it," I said. Chloe piped up. "Grandma, can I see the sewing room?" "No, honey," I said gently. "That's my workspace." Teresa reached out as if to smooth Chloe's hair, but her hand stopped midair. She looked at me again. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" "Yes," I said. Kevin let out a short laugh, the kind that says someone thinks you're bluffing. "Come on, Maggie. It's not like we're strangers. We're only talking a few months." "That's not what you told your landlord," I said. They both froze. Kevin frowned. "What do you mean?" "You already gave up your lease," I said. "You're not planning a few months. You're planning indefinite." Teresa's face flushed. "Who told you that?" "I pay attention," I said simply. She set the muffin down. "We just need a chance to get back on our feet." "You've had chances," I said. "You're still standing." Luke slumped against Kevin's side. "Dad, can we go now?" "Not yet," Kevin muttered. Teresa straightened her shoulders. "You're making this hard, Maggie. We thought you'd be happy to have company." "You thought wrong," I said. Kevin stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was making a deal. "What if we cover some bills? Electric, water, whatever you want." "That's generous," I said. "How much exactly?" He blinked. "Whatever we can." "That's not an answer," I said. "That's a promise to give nothing in particular at no particular time." Teresa's mouth opened, then shut. She looked at Kevin. "We should go," she said finally. Kevin muttered something under his breath but gathered the kids. Teresa picked up the plate of muffins and left it on the counter. She paused at the door. "We're still family, Maggie. Remember that." "I remember a lot of things," I said. They left. The door closed. I stood still for a moment, then locked it. The house felt larger again, like it had exhaled. I carried the muffins to the trash and dropped them in. They were probably fine, but the gesture was off. In the Guard, we call it softening the target. Offer something sweet before you move in. Back in the kitchen, I took out my notebook and added a line under Saturday's plan. Expect early arrival, keep Sharon present. I dialed Sharon. They came, I said. I figured they would, she replied. How'd it go? They tested the perimeter. I held it. Good, she said. I'll be there first thing Saturday. Coffee's on you. Done, I said and hung up. I walked into the sewing room and closed the door. The smell of fabric and thread steadied me. Spools lined the shelves like soldiers in formation. My machine sat ready. I ran my fingers over the table edge. This was my space. My hands, my work, my life. For a moment, I pictured Luke and Chloe scattering buttons and thread, Kevin leaving his boots by the door, Dolores asking me where the medicine was. The image tightened my chest. I took a deep breath and sat at the machine. It hummed as I pressed the pedal. The needle went up and down, neat and fast, like a heartbeat. Stitch by stitch, the fabric held together. Out front, a car door slammed. I peeked through the curtain. Kevin's truck pulled away. Teresa stared straight ahead, jaw tight. The kids looked restless in the back seat. I closed the curtain and went back to sewing. No speeches, no drama, just the steady sound of a machine making clean lines. My notebook lay open on the table beside me, and the pen rested across it. Without looking, I reached over and wrote a single note in block letters. Hold the line. The machine hummed. The house was quiet. My pulse slowed. Nothing felt like an ending. It felt like part of the same movement, one action flowing into the next without pause. The hum of the sewing machine still lingered in my ears when I laced up my running shoes and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The street was quiet except for a delivery truck rumbling down the block. I started a brisk walk toward the park, letting the movement clear my head. Cedar Creek's small park wasn't much, but it had a dirt trail and benches under big oak trees, enough space to breathe. Sharon was already waiting near the entrance, coffee in one hand, a folder in the other. She wore her old VA hospital jacket, the one with Nurse Mills, still faintly stitched on the chest. You look like you're about to run a PT test, she said. I'm about to run a different kind of test, I replied. We walked the loop together. The neighborhood ladies were scattered along the trail, doing their usual morning walk and talk. Over the past few months, we'd become a loose squad of women who'd seen enough to recognize manipulation from a mile away. They waved at me as I passed. Morning, Maggie, called out Mrs. Carter, a spry 7-2-year-old who could outpace most people half her age. Morning, I said back, adjusting my stride. Sharon handed me the folder. I printed everything Cooper sent. Step-by-step instructions for keeping your trust airtight, plus a list of local contacts if you need them on Saturday. I also added the phone number for the sheriff's non-emergency line, just in case Kevin tries to get creative. I flipped through the pages as we walked. You're thorough. You taught me, she said. Besides, it's easier to act calm when you know your options. We stopped at the bench near the pond. Ducks drifted across the water, oblivious to everything. Sharon sipped her coffee. How did yesterday go? They came bearing muffins, I said. She snorted. Classic. And Luke almost went into my sewing room. Kevin tried to talk money. Teresa looked like she wanted to disappear. And you? I stayed calm. Stated facts. That's the way, she said. A couple of the other women joined us on the bench. Mrs. Alvarez, a retired teacher, leaned on her cane. Maggie, you okay? I'm fine, I said. We've all been there, she said. Kids think you're a free Airbnb. You stand your ground. I smiled at her. That's the plan. Sharon glanced at me. Tell them what you told me, she said. I hesitated, then explained about the trust, the cabin, the Saturday plan. The women listened without interrupting. When I finished, Mrs. Alvarez nodded slowly. Good. You're not just saying no. You're prepared. That's how we survive, Sharon added. One of the younger walkers, a 60-year-old widow named Patty, spoke up. If you need someone else there Saturday, I can come too. People behave when they see numbers. Thanks, I said. Let me think about it. We finished our loop. As we walked back toward the parking lot, Sharon lowered her voice. You're holding up well, but don't underestimate how far they'll push. Kevin's pride will take a hit. Teresa's guilt will spike. Dolores will play the elder card. I know, I said. You're still the same Maggie from training, she said. You have a plan, you stick to it, and you don't get rattled. I laughed. Trying to. Back at my house, Sharon followed me inside. We spread the papers across the kitchen table. She pointed to the sheriff's number. If they try to force entry, call. Don't debate. I will, I said. She eyed the muffins still in the trash. Symbolic, she said. I smirked. Can't be bought with carbs. We sat with our coffee, going over scenarios. What if Kevin tried to unload the truck anyway? What if Teresa cried? What if Dolores claimed a medical emergency? Each time we came back to the same answer. Keep the door locked, show the papers, call for help if needed. Stick to facts, not feelings, Sharon repeated. By noon, she had to leave for a doctor's appointment. I walked her out. She gave me a quick hug. Remember, you're not alone. I know, I said. After she left, I opened my laptop and logged into the Veterans Forum I joined years ago. The thread titled Family Boundaries After Service had dozens of new posts. I read through stories from other vets dealing with adult kids, siblings, even parents trying to move in. Some had caved and regretted it. Others had held the line and regained peace. One woman wrote, "They'll call you selfish, cruel, ungrateful. Let them. Freedom is worth more." I bookmarked it. I spent the afternoon tightening my plan. I packed a bag with essential clothes and documents for Pine Ridge, placed it in the trunk. I changed the spare key location. I texted Major Cooper to confirm she'd be reachable on Saturday if anything went sideways. At 1,500, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered anyway. "Captain Foster, this is Janet with Cedar Creek County Legal Aid. Major Cooper asked me to check in with you." I sat straighter. "Hello, and Aller. I've reviewed your trust documents," Janet said. "Everything is valid. You are under no obligation to let anyone move in. If they attempt to, you have the right to call law enforcement. Do you need me to draft a notice for your door?" "That would be helpful," I said. "I'll email it by tonight. Print and post it near the entrance. It's not legally required, but it signals you're serious." "Thank you," I said. After the call, I printed the email when it arrived and taped it neatly inside the front window where anyone could see it. It read, "Private residence, no unauthorized entry, property protected under Veterans Trust." I stepped back and looked at it. Not aggressive, just factual. As evening came on, I cooked a simple dinner and sat at the table. The house was quiet. The smell of coffee had faded. I opened my notebook again and wrote down 3 names under Allies, Sharon, Major Cooper, Janet Legal Aid. Then under Assets, Trust, Cabin, Paperwork, Training. I thought about the women at the park, their faces when I explained my plan. It wasn't pity, it was respect. We all knew what it meant to carve out a space of your own after a lifetime of serving others. The clock ticked toward 1,900. Outside, the streetlights flicked on. I stood up, locked the door, and walked into my sewing room. My machine waited. Thread already loaded. I sat down, pressed the pedal, and let the needle move. The sound was steady, like footsteps on a trail. I wasn't rehearsing speeches or imagining confrontations. I was simply sewing, one line after another, building something strong. The smell of fabric, the hum of the machine, the weight of the trust papers in my bag, everything was in its place. My support network wasn't just people. It was a structure, a perimeter built out of discipline and preparation. The thread ran smooth. My shoulders loosened. Nothing about the moment felt like an ending or a pause. It was just part of the movement forward, one deliberate action after another. The sound of the sewing machine still echoed faintly in my ears the next afternoon when a knock rattled the front door louder this time, more like someone demanding entry than asking permission. I stood, walked calmly down the hall, and opened the door just enough to see Kevin standing there with his hands on his hips. He didn't bother with small talk. "We need to settle this right now, Maggie." I kept my tone flat. "Settle what?" "You know what?" he said, pushing his weight into the frame. "We're moving in. You can't just slam the door on family." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "We're talking here, not in my living room." His jaw tightened. "You think you can just live alone in that big place while we're crammed into an apartment?" Teresa's in tears. The kids don't even have space to do their homework. Dolores can't walk up the stairs without losing her breath. And you, what do? You sit here sewing. I folded my arms. "That's my right. This is my house." He laughed, but it wasn't friendly. "Come on, Maggie. You're being dramatic. It's temporary. We'll find something bigger. You won't even notice us. Hat. Kevin, I said, steady as if delivering an order at drill. I notice already, because you never asked. You told. He raised his voice. Family helps each other. Or do they teach you in the Guard to abandon your own blood? The words landed sharp, but I didn't flinch. In the Guard, we're taught boundaries, respect, and accountability. You don't get to storm someone's perimeter just because you ran out of supplies. He blinked, thrown off by the military tone. Then his voice rose again. We're not enemies, Maggie. We're family. What kind of sister lets her own sister suffer like this? The kind who spent 20 years being told she owed everybody everything, I replied. I'm not that woman anymore. Teresa came around the corner then, clutching Chloe's hand. Her face looked weary. Maggie, please, don't do this. We just need some breathing room. I looked at her. And what do I get? Where's my breathing room? She swallowed hard. You're being cold. I'm being clear, I said. Kevin stepped forward again, lowering his voice. Look, we can pitch in. Rent, bills, groceries, whatever. You said that yesterday, I replied. How much, Kevin? Exact numbers. He stammered. We'll figure it out. I shook my head. Then it's nothing. Chloe tugged Teresa's sleeve. Mom, can we go inside? I want to see the rooms. Teresa hesitated, her eyes flicking to me. I didn't move. She turned to Chloe and whispered, Not yet, honey. Kevin's hands curled into fists at his sides. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this when you're old and alone. Maybe, I said, steady. But I'd rather be alone than disrespected. A long silence stretched. The kids shuffled, bored and confused. Dolores finally got out of the car, leaning on her cane. Maggie, I raised Kevin right. He's a good man. He just wants to take care of his family. Don't be stubborn. You're not getting any younger. I looked at her politely. With respect, Dolores, this is not your decision. You don't get a room in my house. None of you do. Kevin exploded then. So that's it? You're just slamming the door on all of us? I met his glare. That's it. You don't have permission to enter. End of discussion. He cursed under his breath, grabbed the truck keys, and stalked back to the car. Teresa followed, head down, Chloe still clutching her hand. Luke trailed behind, silent. Dolores sighed dramatically before easing herself back into the passenger seat. I stood on the porch until they drove away. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. Inside, I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against the wood for just a second. The air in the house felt steady again, like the pressure had dropped. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed my notebook. Under Saturday's list, I wrote, Direct confrontation, held line, expect escalation. A few minutes later, the phone buzzed. Sharon's name lit up the screen. I answered. You okay? She asked. They came. It got heated, I said. Did you hold your ground? Yes. Then you're fine, she said simply. Her voice steadied me more than she knew. We talked through what had happened, line by line, like soldiers after an exercise reviewing each move. No dramatics, no second guessing. Just a clear record of facts. When I hung up, I stepped into my sewing room again. The fabric was still laid out, half-stitched from earlier. I sat at the machine and pressed the pedal. The hum filled the silence, steady and mechanical, grounding me. Outside, a car passed, music blaring faintly through its windows. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked at nothing. Inside, my machine kept stitching, the line neat and strong, one pass after another. Nothing about it felt final. It was simply another movement in the same rhythm, me holding the line, stitch by stitch, word by word, action by action, without pause. The fabric under my hands lay flat and perfect, but my mind was already on the garage. I shut off the sewing machine, stood up, and headed for the back door. The late morning air hit my face, warm but dry. My boots crunched on the driveway as I crossed to the garage and raised the door. The space smelled of oil and cedar from the boxes I'd stacked along the wall. Inside were the bags I'd been quietly packing for weeks. My uniforms, my laptop, my grandmother's quilt, the keepsakes that mattered. I opened one of the duffels and checked the cabin keys again. Cool metal, solid weight. This wasn't about running away. It was about moving on my own terms. Sharon pulled up in her white sedan, the same one her son had tried to convince her to sell because older women shouldn't drive. She stepped out with a paper bag of sandwiches. "Fuel first," she said, handing me one. I smiled. Good call. We ate standing by the open garage, like two mechanics on break. Sharon wiped her hands on a napkin. "How's your pulse?" "Steady," I said. "You?" "Always steady," she replied. We went over the plan one more time, not like a script, but like a drill. Keys here, papers there, bag in the trunk, locks checked. She'd park across the street Saturday morning, just another neighbor watching. If Kevin or Teresa tried to argue, she'd stay calm but present. "You're not alone in this," she said, tucking her notes back into her purse. "I know," I said. After she left, I closed the garage door and moved through the house, like a soldier checking a perimeter. Front door locked, back door locked, windows secure. Trust notice taped clearly where any mover could see it. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner from the wipe down I'd done earlier. I paused at the hallway mirror. My reflection looked collected hair, pulled back, plain shirt, no jewelry. A look that said authority, not fragility. I thought about how many times over the years I'd been told to smile, soften, make it easier. Not anymore. At noon, I drove to Pine Ridge. The highway stretched empty for miles, the sky wide. The cabin sat on a rise among trees just starting to bud for spring. It was small, but the porch was solid and the locks were new. I walked through each room slowly. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a little kitchen, a small living area. Sunlight fell through the windows onto bare floors. I opened the storage closet and placed a box of essentials on the shelf: canned food, a few tools, spare bedding. My uniforms went into the small bedroom closet. On the nightstand, I set the framed photo of my first National Guard unit. The place smelled of wood and paint. No ghosts, no tension, just a quiet waiting space. I left the blinds up so the light could pour in. By mid-afternoon, I was back on the road to Cedar Creek. I stopped at the grocery store for basics, coffee, eggs, bread, and noticed the cashier giving me a sympathetic look. Word had clearly traveled. In small towns, it always does. She didn't say anything, and neither did I. Back home, I unpacked the groceries and made a pot of coffee. The house felt cooler now, stripped of any illusion that this was still the old arrangement. It was a command post, a perimeter, and a stage all at once. The phone buzzed with another text from Teresa. "We'll be there early with the truck. Thank you again, Maggie." No question mark, no please, just a statement. I typed nothing back, just set the phone face down on the counter. Later, while the sun dipped low, I changed out the deadbolt on the back door. The metal clicked into place smoothly. I tested it twice. Then I checked the front door chain, tightened the screws. My hands moved steady, like cleaning a rifle. After that, I walked into the sewing room and packed the machine itself into its case. Not because I was afraid of losing it, but because I wanted it with me at the cabin. That room had been my sanctuary. Now it was my rally point. Sharon called in the evening. "How's your perimeter?" she asked. "Solid," I said. "You sound ready." "I'm not looking for a fight," I said. "You're looking for respect," she replied. "Big difference." We hung up. I went to the kitchen and poured another cup of coffee, sipping it slowly while looking out the window. Across the street, Mrs. Carter was watering her plants. She glanced up and waved. I waved back. Normal, everyday life, even as my own house stood at the edge of a family storm. I pulled out my notebook and wrote in block letters, "Saturday execute plan. Stay calm. Show papers. Control door." Beneath it I added, "Cabin stocked, locks changed, witness present." The evening light made long bars across the kitchen floor. I stood there for a moment, letting my eyes trace the pattern. Nothing in me felt like a countdown or an ending. It was just another day of preparation, one action flowing naturally into the next. I closed the notebook, placed it on the counter, and moved through the house one more time. Everything was in its place. The smell of coffee, the faint lemon cleaner, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, ordinary details that felt like anchors. In the sewing room, the empty table waited. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface where the machine had been. Out front, a car passed slowly, bass thudding from its stereo. The sound faded. I sat at the table for a moment, hands folded, breathing steady. My mind didn't drift to speeches or revenge fantasies. It stayed on small, concrete tasks: make coffee, lock door, check papers. Each action linked to the next like clean stitches in a line of fabric. When I finally stood, the house felt solid under my feet. No drama, no flinch, no pause, just a steady flow of preparation moving forward without a hitch. The first light of Saturday was just sliding across the kitchen counter when I poured coffee into 2 mugs. Sharon was already at the door, her jacket zipped up and her hair pulled back like she was reporting for duty. She set her bag on the table without a word. We drank our coffee standing, both of us watching the street through the front window. The trust notice was taped neatly next to the doorbell, the folder of papers open on the counter, the locks tested twice. My go bag sat in the hallway, zipped and ready, not as an escape kit, but as my anchor. At 9:07 a.m., the first moving truck turned onto the street. Kevin was at the wheel, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. Behind him, Teresa's SUV followed with the kids and Dolores. The truck slowed and stopped right in front of my driveway, hazard lights flashing. Movers hopped out and started lowering the ramp. Sharon took another sip of coffee. "Remember facts, not feelings," she murmured. "I know," I said. We walked outside together. I stayed on the porch. Sharon stood slightly behind me, arms crossed, calm as a nurse in triage. "Morning," I called out, my voice even. Teresa smiled too brightly as she got out of the SUV. "Morning! We're here. Kids are so excited." Kevin waved at the movers. "Go ahead. Start unloading." I raised my hand. "Stop. Nothing comes into this house." The movers hesitated, glancing at Kevin, then at me. Kevin frowned. "What are you talking about? The truck's rented. We've got everything packed." "You're not moving in," I said. "No one is." Teresa's smile faltered. "Maggie, don't do this in front of the kids." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm enforcing my boundary." Kevin stomped up the driveway until he stood at the bottom of the porch. "You're being unreasonable. We've already given notice at the apartment. We've spent money on this truck. We don't have anywhere else to go." That's your decision," I said calmly. Dolores got out of the car, leaning on her cane. "Maggie, I'm an old woman. Where am I supposed to sleep?" "With respect, Dolores," I said. "I'm not responsible for housing you." Teresa's face crumpled. "Maggie, please, think about the kids." "I am," I said. "They don't need to grow up thinking it's okay to take over someone else's home." Kevin jabbed a finger toward me. "We're family. That house is family property." "Ves." I reached for the folder on the table just inside the door, opened it, and held up the top document. "No, it's my property. It's held in a veteran's trust. Here's the paperwork." The mover stepped back. One of them, an older guy with tattoos up his arm, cleared his throat. "Sir, if the lady says we can't unload, we can't unload." Kevin turned on him. "We hired you." "Yeah," the man said. "But we don't break the law." Teresa wiped at her eyes, looking from Kevin to me. "We've already told the kids this was their new home. How am I supposed to explain this to them?" "That's your job," I said softly but firmly. Chloe tugged at Teresa's sleeve. "Mom, what's happening?" Teresa knelt down, hugging her daughter. Luke stood off to the side, staring at the ground. Kevin swore under his breath. "I can't believe you're doing this." "I'm not doing this," I said. "You are. You made plans without asking me. This is the result." End quote. Sharon stepped forward, her voice level. "Kevin, it's over. You need to move the truck." He glared at her. "You stay out of this." "I'm here as a witness," she said evenly. Dolores raised her voice. "You're cruel, Maggie. After everything this family has done for you." I took a slow breath. "Dolores, this isn't cruelty. This is a boundary. You don't have to like it, but you do have to respect it." Kevin's hands clenched at his sides. "Fine. We'll bring a lawyer. We'll prove you're not in your right mind." "Do that," I said. "Bring the documents that show this house is yours, because I have all of mine." The movers started loading the ramp back up. One of them muttered, "Sorry, ma'am," as he passed. Teresa stood, still holding Chloe's hand. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "We have nowhere to go tonight." "That's not true," I said. "Martha's parents have space. You told me." Her eyes widened. Kevin glared at her. "You told her that?" she asked. Teresa said weakly. Kevin cursed again, spun on his heel, and stalked back to the truck. He slammed the driver's door. Teresa looked at me one last time. You've changed. I've grown up, I said. Dolores muttered something in Spanish under her breath and climbed back into the SUV. The kids climbed in after her. Kevin revved the engine. The movers stood awkwardly near their van, waiting for instructions. Let's go, Kevin barked. They rolled out, hazard lights blinking, the truck heavy with boxes that wouldn't cross my threshold. I stayed on the porch until both vehicles turned the corner. My hands were steady at my sides. Sharon handed me the coffee mug I'd set down earlier. You handled that like a pro, she said. It's just facts, I replied. We went back inside. The house felt calm, the air almost cool against my skin. The trust papers lay on the table exactly where I'd placed them. Sharon sat down and exhaled. You okay? She asked. I'm fine, I said. How about you? I'm good, she said. That was something. I poured more coffee for both of us. We sat at the table without speaking for a moment, the quiet of the house wrapping around us like a normal Saturday morning. Then I stood and began picking up the few things I'd set aside for quick access. The folder of documents, my keys, my bag. Not because I was running, because the plan was in motion, and every part of it was still mine to control. The kitchen smelled of coffee. The light through the window fell across the floor in straight, even lines. My breathing stayed steady. There was no sense of finality, no drum roll for what came next, just the rhythm of one action flowing naturally into another, like walking a familiar trail with a clear map in my head. The kitchen clock ticked softly as Sharon gathered her things. She glanced at me over her coffee cup. You handled yourself, Maggie. That could have gone ugly fast. That. It's only ugly if I let it, I said. She nodded and left through the back door. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. It was steady, like a training ground after a drill. I rinsed the mugs, wiped the counter, and sat down with my notebook. Under Saturday, I wrote, truck blocked, no entry, threat of lawyer. Then underlined it twice. At 1:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered. This is Mark Davis, from Davis & Klein Law Group, a voice said smoothly. I'm calling on behalf of Kevin and Teresa Harrison. They've informed me you're unlawfully refusing them entry to a family property. I let the words sit for a beat. It's not family property, I said calmly. It's held in my veterans' trust. I have full documentation. We'll need to see that, he said. I'll email it right now, I replied. There was a pause. Fine. Send it to this address, he said, rattling off an email. I will, I said. And please inform your clients they're trespassing if they attempt to enter. He chuckled softly. You're quite direct, Miss Foster. Captain Foster, I corrected. Army National Guard. Another pause. Duly noted. We hung up. I scanned the trust papers into a PDF, attached it to an email, and hit send. Then I called Janet at Cedar Creek County Legal Aid. They've lawyered up, I told her. I figured they would, she said. Don't panic. You're clean. If they show up again, call law enforcement and show your papers. Do not argue on the porch. Just call. Understood? I said. I spent the next hour tidying small things, the kind of small, deliberate actions that keep your head clear. Folded laundry, packed another box for the cabin, checked the locks again. At 3:30 p.m., the phone rang again. This time it was Teresa. Her voice was low and tight. You didn't have to humiliate us like that. I didn't humiliate you, I said. You made plans without permission. I showed you the boundary. You don't understand, she said. We have nowhere else. Kevin's furious. The kids are confused. Dolores feels sick. I'm sorry for all of that, I said. But I'm not your safety net. You're my sister, she hissed. I'm still your sister, I said calmly. But I'm not your landlord. She went quiet, then said, You've changed. The Army changed you. The Army taught me to take responsibility, I said. That's all. She hung up without another word. I put the phone down and walked into the sewing room. The empty table stood where the machine had been. Sunlight poured through the window. I took a slow breath, feeling my pulse steady again. At 5 p.m., Sharon texted, You okay? Yes, I wrote back. They called a lawyer. Expected, she replied. Stand firm. I closed my eyes for a moment. In my mind, I saw the field exercise where we'd practiced perimeter defense. One instructor had said, they'll try pressure, guilt, confusion. Your job is to hold your position. No raised voice, no threats, just hold. I cooked a simple dinner, scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee, and ate at the kitchen table. My phone lay face down. Outside, kids rode bikes past my driveway, laughing. The normal life of the neighborhood rolled on. When I finished eating, I cleaned the dishes, then sat down with my notebook again. I wrote under allies, Janet legal aid confirmed. Under actions, cabin stocked, locks changed, lawyer notified. Under principle, stay calm, show papers, call law enforcement if needed. A few minutes later, a car slowed in front of the house. It was Kevin's truck. He sat there idling, staring at the house. I stood up but didn't move toward the window. After about a minute, he drove off. I didn't call Sharon or Janet. I didn't even write it down. Some things don't need immediate reaction, they just need to pass. Instead, I went to the trunk of my car, lifted the go bag out, and double-checked everything. Trust papers, cabin keys, uniforms, laptop, quilt, everything was there. I set it back in the trunk and closed it. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and fabric. The clock ticked. My breathing stayed steady. I sat at the table and began sewing by hand, just a small tear on a sleeve I'd found in the laundry. The needle moved in and out, quick and neat. Each stitch was a small, deliberate act of control. Around 7 p.m., the phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unknown number. You'll regret this. Families stick together. No signature. I stared at it, then deleted it without replying. The sun dropped behind the trees. Porch lights clicked on up and down the street. I closed the blinds, locked the door, and poured another coffee. The house felt calm. Not triumphant, not anxious, just calm. I walked into the hallway and paused at the mirror again. My face looked the same calm, plain shirt, hair pulled back. Not hard, not cold, just clear. Back in the kitchen, I opened the notebook one more time and wrote, perimeter intact, then shut it. The refrigerator hummed quietly. My shoulders loosened. I moved to the sewing room and sat down, running a hand over the empty table where the machine had been. No speeches, no anticipation, just the steady rhythm of a house holding its own line, one quiet moment at a time. Sunday morning, I drove out before the sun came up. The highway empty and the sky still gray. The trunk was packed tight duffels, sewing machine, documents, food. The tires hummed steady on the road. By the time I reached Pine Ridge, the light was gold across the trees. The cabin stood waiting, quiet and solid. Inside, it smelled faintly of wood and fresh air. I set my bag down in the bedroom and carried the sewing machine to the small table by the window. The light fell straight across the wood, perfect for working. My grandmother's quilt went on the bed. The uniforms went in the closet. Everything fit. I brewed coffee on the small stove and sat on the porch with the mug in both hands. The trees swayed and a hawk circled overhead. There was no noise but birds and wind. My breathing settled deeper than it had in months. Over the next week, I cleaned, patched, and organized. The cabin wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I scrubbed floors, fixed a loose hinge, stacked canned food in the pantry. At night, I sat by the small lamp and wrote in my notebook. Rebuilding phase. Establish new routine. On Thursday, Sharon drove up with 2 boxes in her trunk. One was filled with fabric she'd been saving. The other was full of old medical training guides. You'll need these, she said, carrying them inside. I looked at the stack of guides. For what? For what you're starting here, she said. I frowned. I'm just trying to settle in. She smirked. Sure, and that's why you've already got a schedule taped to your fridge with drills, meal plans, and classes. I laughed. Old habits. She sat on the porch, sipping coffee. Old habits build new futures. You'll see. End crate. By the weekend, I had my first visitor, a woman named Karen, a fellow veteran who'd heard through the grapevine that I had space for training. She'd been struggling with her health since leaving service and wanted to rebuild her strength. I set up a workout plan with her using little more than the yard, a rope, and a few sandbags. She left sweaty, tired, and smiling. Word spread faster than I expected. Within 3 weeks, I had 4 women coming on weekends. We worked on strength, endurance, and discipline. Not military-style yelling, just structure and consistency. They called it Maggie's camp. I didn't correct them. One evening, Sharon and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. She nodded toward the small group of women leaving with water bottles in hand. Told you. You weren't running away. You were running forward. I thought about that as I sipped my coffee. She was right. Back in Cedar Creek, things were shifting too. Kevin called once, his voice lower than before. We're working things out, he said. Got a temporary rental. It's tight, but we'll manage. That's good, I said. There was a pause. Then he added, You were right. We assumed too much. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the closest I'd ever heard from him. Teresa called a week later. Her voice was softer. The kids miss you. Could they come out sometime? Just for a visit? They can, I said, as long as everyone understands the rules. No surprises. She agreed. 2 weeks later, Luke and Chloe came out to the cabin for the afternoon. We grilled hot dogs, walked the trail, and I showed them how to start a fire in the pit. They laughed more than I'd seen them laugh in months. At the end of the day, when Teresa picked them up, she stood quietly for a moment before saying, This place suits you. I nodded. It does. She didn't argue. She didn't push. Just drove away with the kids waving out the back window. The weeks rolled into months. The cabin became not just a refuge but a hub. More women came for training. Some stayed for a day, some for a week. They told their stories around the fire at night about deployments, about families who didn't understand, about starting over. We listened, we worked, we rebuilt. My notebook filled with new lists, workout schedules, grocery needs, cabin repairs. Under principle, I wrote, Boundaries create space for growth. One night, after a long day of drills, Sharon stayed over. We sat at the kitchen table with mugs of tea. She looked around the cabin and shook her head. You realize this is bigger than family drama now, right? I raised an eyebrow. You took something ugly and turned it into something useful, she said. That's rare. I didn't reply. I just looked at the quilt on the bed, the machine on the table, the women's gear stacked neatly by the door. It was true, and yet it didn't feel like a triumph. It just felt steady, like each stitch I'd ever sewn, each drill I'd ever led, one action flowing into another until something whole took shape. By early summer, I got a card in the mail. It was from Teresa. Inside was a short note in her handwriting. Thank you for holding the line. We're figuring things out. The kids loved their visit. No apology, no excuses, just acknowledgement. I folded the card and placed it in my notebook. That evening, I sat on the porch as the sun dropped low and the trees swayed. My breathing was steady. The air smelled of pine, and the sound of laughter carried faintly from the trail where a couple of the women were finishing their run. It wasn't an ending. It wasn't even a new beginning. It was life, moving forward in a clear, steady line, one deliberate action at a time, without pause. The morning sun at Pine Ridge poured through the cabin windows, landing on the hardwood like a quiet flag. I stood at the small sink rinsing a coffee mug while the sound of boots and sneakers drifted in from outside. The women were finishing their warm-up drills, calling out times to each other, laughing in between reps. The smell of cut pine mixed with coffee and sweat. I grabbed a clipboard from the table and walked out to the porch. Karen and 2 new participants were doing rope climbs between trees. Sharon sat on the porch rail, a whistle around her neck, taking notes. This was her day off. But she'd started showing up just to help. You've got a real thing going here, she said without looking up. It's not a thing, I said. It's just training. Call it what you want, she replied. I watched the women work. Some were veterans, some spouses, some just looking for structure. None of them looked like victims. They looked like people building strength one rep at a time. When the drills wrapped up, I handed out water bottles and we all sat under the shade trees. Conversation was easy. No speeches, no slogans. Just people trading tips on sore muscles, food prep, and how to handle family pulling at their time. One of the newer women, Dana, said quietly, I thought I was the only one. Turns out I'm not. No, you're never the only one, I said. They nodded, then stood and started cleaning up gear without being told. Discipline without barking, just a steady rhythm. Later, When the yard was empty again, I went inside and opened my notebook. Under principle, I wrote, "Holding the line is an act of care, not anger." Then under actions, keep schedule, maintain cabin, weekend visits with kids. The following Saturday, Luke and Chloe arrived with Teresa. They ran from the car to hug me before she even turned off the engine. We grilled burgers, walked the trail, and I showed them how to tie a simple climbing knot. Chloe managed it first, and grinned like she'd just earned a badge. Luke built a small fire under supervision and sat back proudly. Teresa stayed in the background, helping set plates on the picnic table. She looked around the property and then at me. "They really like it here," she said quietly. "I'm glad," I said. "I'm trying," she added. I nodded. That's all anyone can do. She didn't push. She didn't plead. She just watched the kids and smiled faintly. That night, after they'd gone, I sat on the porch with Sharon and two of the regulars. Fireflies blinked over the grass. Sharon sipped tea. "When I first met you, you were running everything like a battle plan. Now look at this place." "It's still a plan," I said. "It's just a different mission." She smiled. "Mission accepted." I'm set. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood and fabric. My sewing machine sat on the table with a half-finished patch for one of the women's jackets. I sat down and pressed the pedal. The needle moved in a steady rhythm. Outside, the voices faded as everyone went to their rooms or their cars. My phone buzzed once. A text from Kevin. "We're doing okay. Found a small house. Thanks for the lesson." No sarcasm, no threats. Just that. I put the phone down and wrote in my notebook. Lesson learned: respect sticks better than guilt. Then I got up and walked to the flagpole. Sharon had helped me install by the edge of the yard. We'd found it at a surplus sale, polished it, and set it in concrete. The flag lifted in the evening breeze. I stood with my hands behind my back, not at rigid attention, just standing. Some of the women came out, curious, and formed a loose semicircle. Without thinking about it, I spoke out loud. Voice even but carrying. Setting boundaries isn't betraying family. It's showing them where you end and they begin. It's not rejection. It's respect for yourself and for them. No applause, no grand gesture, just heads nodding, the flag moving overhead, the smell of pine and sweat and coffee in the air. I lowered my hands, turned, and headed back to the porch. Someone started talking about tomorrow's workout. Someone else laughed. The sound of ordinary conversation filled the space. Back inside, I finished stitching the patch, trimmed the thread, and set it neatly on the table. The machine hummed to a stop. The room was warm, full of light. Nothing about the moment felt like an ending. It felt like a clean, straight line of action, the kind of line you can build on. A perimeter held not by walls but by clarity. A steady rhythm of work, respect, and self-possession flowing forward without pause.